Tim and Sanna, thank you for talking with me today. Tim, you just finished up the Mental and Mastery Lab program, or I've recently rebranded as the Invisible Labor Intensive. 10 sessions. This is our third of the one-on-ones. Um, we started back in June. It's October now, so it's been a couple months. Um, Tell me a little bit about when you booked that first call with me. I think it was in early June, to consider working with me. Where were you guys at in your relationship, and or where were you the previous months?
Mm. We were at a low point, and we were at a low point that we had seen before at a multiplier where something had to change. And I was, although hungry for a solution, because the alternatives were at the time divorce or at least trauma. And we have three children. And it felt like a bright light in a tunnel because there are options. There are all sorts of training and coaching things out there. But the one that really hit for Sana was finding you on Instagram. And as we've been discussing, the real one was around the blueberry muffins with a lost husband asking his wife if it was too hot. And
in a different room.
And so because it had humor and because of your persona, I was like, I instantly trusted you, instantly felt like this guy is capturing this moment in time, the zeitgeist of fair play. And the phrasing that I've actually been using that we haven't discussed today is around at what point did the person who I loved the most, who I dated, fell in love with, married, and we have plans like everyone, at what point did we agree that I would continue to expand on my career that's so important, and Sana would take on all of the domestic labor and mental labor attached to it, emotion, all of it to keep us alive, healthy, and find joy and handle. When did that meeting happen? It didn't, and so it just connected with the concept of fair play. And so at that time, I was hungry and optimistic and motivated. And those don't guarantee success. But at that time, those were the factors that were true for me.
And Sana, similarly, where do you feel like you guys were before you started, and we can bridge over into like where do you feel like you are now?
Yeah, I think, there was just this moment in December where I was like, this is not going to work for me anymore. I am so tired. I also had a career. I was a teacher, and I was just doing everything. And no matter how many times I would tell him, hey, this is really a big deal for me, and my brain is imploding, he would go, yeah, and it would change for 3 days, and then it would stop, and then he'd go back to his old habits. And I was just like, I'm done. I want out. But I knew that I didn't really want that. I just knew that something had to change. And so we were, thinking of counseling, or thinking of just having a break, or having I don't know. And then I sent him the blueberry video. You know how sometimes Instagram reads your thoughts, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna send this woman Zach Watson. And I just thought it was so funny because it was just the epitome of everything, like the silly questions and the just organizing everything. And now they're those questions aren't there anymore. Like, and it's a complete 180. Like, he doesn't, I mean, he has questions, but he prefaces them by saying things like, hey, I've looked here, I've done this, or I've checked this blueberry muffin. No, I'm kidding. But he's just thinking, and he's 100% aware of what I would do in a situation. He'd go, how would Sana fix this? Or how would Sana think about this? And it doesn't even, it's a completely different feeling. I have the emotional labor has been halved, I believe. And we're still working on it, but it really does. I was exhausted by it and upset by it. And now I'm not either of those things. I'm like, I know that Tim is going to get up and do some laundry and see that it needs to be done and see that the downstairs needs to, all these things. I know that now. And he sees stuff. He sees stuff. Before he'd see stuff and just walk past it. And I don't know why that was, but now he sees it and goes, I don't want Sanna to have to do that, so I'm going to do it myself or get the kids to do it.
Tim, I remember in the first couple sessions you were talking about like you started implementing like purposeful look arounds of like the space you guys are in. What was it that you think helped you change the vision that you have of like that, oh, I just, I just don't see laundry. I just don't see the socks on the ground. I don't see the dirt. Like what had you transform and be able to see the things that are needed around the home?
Yeah, I think there were multiple multiple drivers for that. But in a sort of scientific way, it was sort of gamifying it by looking at what I would describe as Sanna's cortisol levels, right? So what were the spikes caused by, well, spikes as I begin to describe it, but what were the loads that were generating that? And so I guess I've had a couple of sort of angels on my shoulder as I go through the day. One caveat that's really important is we made a huge employment decision. One of the cool and tragic things about me is I've been very good at starting things, and I've been complaining about being too busy. So one caveat has to be is that we walked away from one of the jobs that I have to make this work. But that has freed up cycles of focus and energy and love, because I find joy. It's hard to imagine because our laundry is real small, but I find joy in doing that. I find joy in seeing my kids adopt guidelines around what is cool standards to achieve. Minimum standards, ideally, better anyway. So it was really around wanting Sanna's mental health and physical health to benefit from it, and also to feel like I'm being fair, to have the brand that you are unfair, I think is in the human condition is very triggering. Why am I not fair? And I wish to be. That's how I wish to be, not just be seen, but to be. So yeah, so it was one of several tools that I've very gleefully adopted over the last months. But yeah, being aware of what impact your negative and positive actions have on the person you care about the most.
So, and I feel like what I'm hearing here is historically, there are things that you didn't see because you saw that they were things that Sanna cared about, but that you didn't necessarily care about. And it sounds like you've kind of flipped a switch saying, you know what, if she cares about them and she sees them, then I am capable of putting her glasses on and seeing and caring about the things that she sees. And I can look through, I can purposefully look through this lens in increments of time until I'm just wearing her glasses in perpetuity almost, it sounds like.
There is that. I want to be careful about it being Sanna's glasses to have, right? Ideally,
yeah,
we're wearing the same glasses. She has had to wear them exclusively. I'm also aware that a lot of the way I think is it can be scattered, and it looks scattered. And I've been guilty of having these other things bubbling up in my head, and I would subliminally filter out things that weren't, to me, time sensitive or critical. And so that valence point at which something becomes critical has changed, because it's those smaller, low-level spikes that cumulatively across the day just can make anyone crazy. This is not a gender thing.
And also the consideration, just what you were saying before about that, the seeing things through my glasses, it wasn't even really a consideration before. It was now everything he thinks about. He thinks, how is it going to impact me and our children and our family as a whole. Because when the mum is not happy, no one's really happy. I think that's kind of true.
It is.
And I know it is true, but yeah, it wasn't a careful and considered thought really before, and now it is in everything you do.
Yes.
Bizarre.
If you could, if you had a message to share with someone that is, they've maybe seen the blueberry muffins video, or they've seen a couple of my videos and they're considering getting help, what would you say to someone that's considering, looking at my coaching?
Personally, I would say I've had a lot of friends who have been through marriage counseling, and it's all this stuff, but they do it with like a person who isn't, I don't know, doesn't have the same skills as you. I have found so much joy in this process, watching him have joy from this process as well, and learning skills and tools by proxy from him, from you, Zach. It has just been a total game changer, because as well, it's just, it's, I think, Zach, because you're just a guy who can do this. I think marriage counseling kind of seems like it's too much, it's like that's all, it's serious shit now. But this is so accessible, and so it's not easy, but it's more accessible, and it is less of a load, I think, than going, let's go and have some marriage counseling and spend thousands of dollars for years, and it never work. Well, it doesn't never work, but it might not work. This works because you've had to retrain your brain. I don't know.
I just don't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
But if I was, I would say
interrupt.
Also, and one thing that someone watching this who's looking at making this decision, is when we first met and had our one-on-one, I was kind of apprehensive about being in a group. And so just briefly I'd like to speak to that. And so it's like, oh, Zach Watson, he's amazing, I'm going to have meetings with him. And then it's like, well, it's in a cohort of other men who are in this, and there'll be one-on-twos with you and your wife. And it's like, okay, in a group thing, this is really private stuff. I don't know. And wow, was I wrong. Like, that cohort was so powerful for me, because instantly felt a kinship with these guys. We're all in different countries or different parts of countries, but all having a very similar moment in culture and time, and seeing also like extremes of success and challenges. And it was sort of like a ring fencing, like, this is normal, and this is what it looks like if you do fall out of this pattern, or this is what it looks like if this person or partner is having this particular challenge, instead of being, as you say, in a marriage counseling paradigm where it's three of you or one-on-ones, and the headline is marriage counseling, because the implication of marriage counseling is binary.
It's dire.
This is going to go well, or something else. Something else.
Yeah.
And with this model, it's more about just being fair and being thoughtful and sharing the goal. I don't wish to disparage marriage counseling, but for me, this was more successful than I can imagine the dice roll of a marriage counselor being.
Yeah, agree.
And not to put words in your mouth, but if I'm hearing right, what you just said there, Tim, is it sounds like the experience of being in the room with other guys that are going through really similar things has been, you're saying, is really helpful. Not only because it almost takes a tiny bit of the seriousness out of it, but having like another guy that's pretty much going through the same thing. I'm a couple grades or a couple chapters ahead of you, but I'm not necessarily not a master. I'm not, I'm not an expert necessarily, but I'm just a couple of chapters ahead.
There's that. I think I'm saying two things. One, I was pleasantly surprised to find that I was wrong, that being in a cohort was more powerful. But also, and I think you're saying this in your reflection, that it takes a little bit of that laser heat off
Yeah.
the one-on-one for an hour. It's now a 1-on-5. And so you're getting to speak. We all spoke as much as we could, but we got to hear, and listening is a big part of this. And we supported each other. We asked each other questions, and we appropriate offered up observations. And I also always looked forward to those meetings.
Yeah.
I missed one, and I still haven't really
He
figured.
was so upset with himself. He missed one last month.
The last one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was,
Last.
it was for that group
Heck.
a little. But also the 2-on-1s. Like normally, like when I think I wanted to, I could see a scenario where I'd be, oh, and now Sanna's, my wife's going to come into this meeting and everything I've said is going to get undone. But instantly it was, we were excited to meet with Zach, right?
Yeah,
if it had been a marriage counseling
fangirl.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true. But also I think that's important too, because we went through that's a really good point. You have to break down everything, and it's quite raw, but it didn't take long. Like it was just like, it was really confronting, and then it wasn't, and then it was easy. Whereas, yeah, I think that
I'd also like to offer something else up, that when we would go to those 2-on-1s or my 1-on-1s with you and in the groups, there would come a challenge where there was no immediate solution, and you would always have a tool. And it wasn't just an anecdote or a thought experiment. It was a system for progressing with a hard conversation, or setting a boundary, or opening up a new option. And I was very impressed, because you're much younger than I am, and I'm very familiar with different counseling methodologies, modalities. And so I was always like, oh, that's very good. And getting to deploy them. And then, as Sanna says, it has a nuclear effect, because she goes, well, how do we do this? Or how would Zach phrase that? Or what would he have suggested? Or more importantly, let me rephrase that. When I would say, this is something I've learned, instead of me just going, here's a cool idea, or here's something we could try. If I said it came from my cohort through you, Zach, your openness to hear it was very
so much better,
optimistic. You know. And beyond Sanna and our kids, also other friend couples have had moments where, without being pushy or invasive, I can say, well, one thing that's worked for us, or for me, has been this, and just watching them go.
Also, Zach, because you're so approachable, and you're so like instantly likable and easy to talk to, and there's no judgment, and there's no I don't know, there's just nothing, there's just like, we feel like we could be your mate, like come round for beers, and that's really a really nice way to it's a really good way to learn from someone, is to be their online mate. It's been really, really lovely, like I'm really upset that's over.
Very last question, and I'm going to ask Sanna this one to you, is what you guys just told me before we started recording here about your Halloween costumes. What has your historical experience been, and what was it like this year?
Okay, so we've been together for almost 20 years, probably, and I have always been in charge of costumes for parties, Halloween.
By default, not necessarily because you agreed that it was on you, but it's just been default yours.
It wouldn't have got done.
It wouldn't have got done, and he's always like a little bit like reluctant, or like that's a dumb theme or whatever. And then this time we got invited to our friend's 50th, and it was a dress up, and I had two really good ideas, and he goes, that's the one, and he went with it, and he took everything. He did everything. I did not have to do a single thing. I didn't have to sew a single button or he went to 5 different stores and got Velcro and stickers and tracksuits, and they're gorgeous, but I didn't have to do a single thing. I just had to show up. I got to be the man. I got to show up and put a costume on and go to a party. It was glorious. I loved being a man.
It was really
thank
fun.
you. thank you too for sharing with the potential people looking at my programming. I really appreciate you sharing your testimonial with me today.
Oh, we love you, Zach. We're gonna miss you.
Yeah, we're very grateful, and anyone who's considering it can reach out to us through the platform that you're using to support this.
Yeah,
Awesome.
absolutely.
I really appreciate that.
Come visit us.
Yes,